Imagine saving every single dollar you earn for an entire year. Now imagine that still not being enough to afford even a down payment on a basic home. That is not a nightmare scenario. That is the real situation millions of Americans are living through right now. Something has gone seriously wrong in the housing market, and today we are going to break it all down so you truly understand what happened, why it happened, and who is actually responsible. Let us start with a number that will shock you. The median home price in the United States has more than doubled in just the last 15 years. Back in 2012, you could buy an average American home for around $170,000. Today, that same type of home costs well over $400,000 in most parts of the country. Wages, however, did not double. They barely moved. So the gap between what people earn and what homes cost has grown into something that feels almost impossible to cross for regular working people. Now here is where it gets really interesting. This did not happen by accident. A perfect storm of decisions, policies, and global events all crashed into each other at once, creating the housing crisis we are stuck in today. To understand it, you need to go back to the year 2008 when the entire American housing market collapsed like a house of cards. Banks had been handing out mortgages to almost anyone who asked, regardless of whether they could actually pay them back. When the system broke, millions of homes went into foreclosure, prices crashed, and construction companies went bankrupt overnight. Here is what most people do not talk about enough. After that 2008 crash, home builders became extremely cautious. They stopped building as many homes as the country actually needed. For over a decade, the United States was building far fewer houses per year than the population required. Every year that went by without enough new homes being built was another year where the gap between supply and demand quietly grew larger. Think of it like musical chairs, but every year someone removes more chairs while more people are trying to find a seat. Then the 2020 pandemic arrived and threw gasoline on the entire fire. Suddenly, millions of people who had been renting small apartments in expensive cities realized they could work from anywhere. Remote work was no longer a privilege for the few, but a reality for millions of white-collar workers across the country. People packed up and moved to smaller cities and suburbs, places where homes had once been affordable. Demand in those areas exploded almost overnight, and prices followed immediately. A house in Boise, Idaho, or Austin, Texas, that once cost $250,000 was suddenly selling for $500,000 or more, with multiple buyers competing in a bidding war. At the same time, mortgage interest rates had been sitting at historic lows for years. The Federal Reserve kept rates near zero to help the economy recover from the pandemic shock. This made borrowing money to buy a home incredibly cheap. When borrowing is cheap, more people jump into the market, which drives prices higher. Every time a new buyer enters a market with limited supply, prices go up for everyone else. Low interest rates sound like great news for buyers, but when everyone can suddenly afford more, sellers simply raise the price to match what the market will bear. Subscribe if you want to keep learning the real stories behind everyday economic problems that affect your life. Then came the inflation crisis of 2022 and 2023. The Federal Reserve, trying to bring inflation under control, raised interest rates at the fastest pace in 40 years. Mortgage rates jumped from around 3% to over 7% within just a matter of months. Here is the cruel twist that most people missed completely. Higher rates were supposed to cool the housing market and bring prices down. But something unexpected happened instead. Homeowners who had locked in those sweet 3% mortgage rates refused to sell. Why would you sell your home and give up a 3% mortgage only to buy a new home at 7%? Millions of homeowners made the logical decision to simply stay put. This meant almost no homes were coming onto the market for new buyers. Prices stayed high because supply stayed low, but now buying was even more expensive because rates had doubled. New buyers got hit from both sides at once. And then there is another player in the story that does not get nearly enough attention. Institutional investors and large corporations began buying up single-family homes at a scale never seen before in American history. Companies like Invitation Homes and BlackRock-backed funds purchased tens of thousands of homes, often paying cash and outbidding regular families. When a corporation pays cash and offers to close in a week with no inspections, a seller will almost always take that deal over a young family still waiting on their mortgage approval. These investors then rented those homes back to the very people who could not afford to buy them. The family that wanted to be a homeowner instead became a tenant paying rent that helped a corporation build wealth instead of their own. Zoning laws have made the whole situation even worse over many decades. Most American cities and suburbs have strict rules that only allow single-family homes to be built in huge areas of land. You cannot build a small apartment building or even a duplex in most residential neighborhoods. This was originally designed to keep neighborhoods looking a certain way, but the practical effect has been to make it nearly impossible to build enough housing to meet demand. Cities like Minneapolis and Austin have started to change these laws, and the results are already showing, with slightly more construction activity and slower price growth compared to places that have not reformed anything yet. So, what does all of this mean for a regular person trying to buy their first home today? It means you are competing against a market that was broken long before you showed up. You are dealing with low supply built up over a decade of underbuilding, prices inflated by investor money, borrowing costs doubled in less than a year, and zoning laws that prevent enough new housing from being built in the places people actually want to live. It is not that this generation is bad with money or spending too much on avocado toast, as some commentators rudely suggested. The math simply does not work the way it did for previous generations, and that is a structural problem, not a personal failure. There are real solutions being discussed, and some already being tested. Cities that loosen zoning laws and allow more dense housing construction are seeing results. States that offer first-time buyer assistance programs help bridge some of the gap. Tax policies that discourage corporations from sitting on large portfolios of empty or underutilized homes could return supply to individual buyers. Expanding public transit so people can live farther from expensive job centers without sacrificing hours of their day also opens up more affordable areas. None of these are magic fixes, but together they start to shift the equation toward regular people. The American dream of home ownership was never supposed to be this complicated. A roof over your head, a place to raise your family, a way to build wealth over time, these are not radical ideas. They are the foundations that generations of Americans built their lives on. Understanding how we got to this point is the first step toward demanding and creating real change. Watch the full video for a deeper look at the numbers and real stories from families navigating this crisis right now.